I want to talk about something that feels like it lives in the pit of your stomach. You know what I'm talking about. The moment after you decide to stop answering the texts, unfollow, or maybe even have that painful, clear conversation, I can't do this anymore. And then comes the guilt. Not the soft kind that nudges your conscience. I mean the kind that whispers, you're selfish, you gave up, you should have tried harder. Here's the truth. Cutting someone off, especially someone you once cared about, is one of the most complex emotional decisions we make. It doesn't mean you don't have empathy. It means you finally used it for yourself. Guilt is a sign you're human, not that you're wrong. Guilt shows up in the most inconvenient places. It doesn't knock politely and wait for permission. It walks in, drops its heavy bags in the middle of your heart and says, look what you did. And when it comes to cutting someone off, especially someone who used to matter to you, guilt doesn't whisper, it screams. But here's something I want you to hear, really hear. Guilt is not always a signal that you've done something wrong. Sometimes it's simply proof that you're human, that you care, that you have a heart that wrestles with tough choices instead of pretending they're easy. One of the hardest things I've learned in my research and in my own life is that our emotions don't always show up in clean categories. They're messy. They overlap. Guilt, for example, often shows up wearing the mask of grief. You think you're feeling guilty for walking away when really you're grieving the version of the relationship you hoped for. Or maybe you're mourning the part of you that kept showing up even when it hurt. That's not something to feel ashamed about. That's something to honor. There's a kind of guilt that's healthy. That kind of guilt says, hey, you acted out of alignment with your values. Let's own it. Let's repair it. But that's not what we're talking about here. The guilt you feel after cutting someone off is often a byproduct of choosing yourself in a world that glorifies self-sacrifice, especially if you're someone who's been the fixer, the listener, the peacekeeper. Walking away feels like breaking your identity. And guilt loves to rush in and say, see, you're not who you thought you were. But what if you are? What if this is actually you becoming more of who you were always meant to be? When I talk to people who have had to make the excruciating choice to walk away, whether it's from a friend, a family member, or a partner, the guilt is almost always tangled up with the question, did I do the right thing? And the answer isn't always black and white, but what I found is this. If you left because you couldn't grow in that space, if you left because staying meant losing pieces of yourself a little at a time, then yes, you did the right thing. Our brains are wired for connection. We're biologically built to maintain bonds. So when we break them, even for our own survival, it feels unnatural. You're going against a deep part of your wiring. But you know what else is in your wiring? The drive for authenticity, the need for safety, the desire to live in alignment with your values. And let's be real, if guilt were a reliable moral compass, the most self-abandoning people on this planet would be saints. But we know that's not true. Guilt doesn't always mean we've done harm. Sometimes it means we've chosen not to keep being harmed. That's a huge distinction. I want to invite you to hold space for both the tenderness and the strength inside you. You're not heartless for protecting your peace. You're not selfish for saying enough. You're someone who felt the ache and made the hard call anyway. That's not a flaw, that's courage. And if you're still carrying guilt, if it's still clinging to your decisions like a shadow, ask yourself this, is this guilt trying to teach me something, or is it trying to keep me small? Because only one of those deserves your attention. Let the rest go. Boundaries are a function of self-respect, not punishment. People often misunderstand boundaries. They hear the word and picture walls, cold, hard, unscalable. Like boundaries are something you put up to shut people out, to punish, to control. But that's not what boundaries are. Not when they're healthy. Not when they're rooted in love and self-respect. Boundaries aren't about keeping people out. They're about making sure what comes in is respectful, honest, and safe. The most compassionate, grounded, and open-hearted people I've ever interviewed were also the ones with the strongest boundaries. That might sound contradictory at first, but it's not. Because when you're clear about what's okay and what's not okay with you, when you honor your own limits, you create space for authentic connection, not performative harmony. Think about it. How many times have you found yourself saying yes when your whole body wanted to say no? How many times have you swallowed your discomfort just to keep the peace? And how often did that lead to resentment, burnout, or emotional exhaustion? That's what happens when we confuse kindness with compliance, when we believe that loving others means betraying ourselves. When you decide to cut someone off or even just take a serious step back, people might say you're being cold or dramatic, that you've changed. And the truth is, you probably have changed. You've grown. You've realized that love without boundaries isn't really love. It's an unspoken agreement to stay silent while your needs go unmet. And that kind of agreement eventually turns toxic. Boundaries are how we teach people how to treat us. They say, I'm still here and I still care, but I won't abandon myself to maintain this relationship. And that might be a hard pill for others to swallow, especially if they've benefited from your lack of boundaries in the past. But it's not your job to carry your discomfort. It's your job to carry your truth. I've seen this especially in families where roles and dynamics get passed down like furniture. No one questions why that chair is in the middle of the room, even if it blocks the light. We're taught to accept dysfunction in the name of loyalty, and the moment you step out of that unspoken contract, you're made to feel guilty, rebellious, ungrateful. But let's be really honest here. What kind of love asks you to diminish yourself to keep it? What kind of loyalty demands silence over truth? The kind that's built on fear, not connection. Healthy relationships welcome boundaries. They might not like them at first, but they grow because of them. Unhealthy relationships will push back, question, manipulate, guilt trip. That response isn't a reflection of your boundary being wrong. It's a reflection of the dysfunction your boundary is exposing. One of the most powerful shifts we can make is understanding that boundaries are an act of self-respect. Not a weapon, not a punishment, but a clear declaration that says, I matter too. That's not selfish. That's necessary. And it doesn't mean you stop loving people. It means you stop loving them in a way that erodes your own well-being. And yes, it will be hard, especially if you're used to being the one who bends, the one who makes it work, the one who's so easy to be around. But let me tell you this, easy to be around isn't always the same as being authentically known. And being liked isn't always the same as being loved. So if you've set a boundary and you're second guessing it, if you've distanced yourself from someone and guilt is creeping in, pause for a moment and ask yourself, was I clear? Was I kind? Was I honest? If the answer is yes, then remind yourself that discomfort is not the same as wrong. It's just new. And new is often what growth looks like in the beginning. Emotional burnout is real and it has a cost. There's a kind of tire that sleep doesn't fix. You know the one I'm talking about, that deep emotional exhaustion that sits in your bones. It's what happens when you've been carrying a relationship on your back for too long, when you've been over-functioning, over-explaining, over-accommodating, and eventually something in you just gives out. We don't talk about emotional burnout enough. We talk about hustle burnout, work burnout, parenting burnout, but emotional burnout, that's the quiet kind, the one that's harder to name because you've been taught to just deal with it, to be the bigger person, to stay connected at all costs. But here's the truth I've come to understand. Emotional burnout in relationships is not just real, it's measurable. The data around emotional labor and chronic stress tells us that long-term exposure to emotionally taxing relationships, especially ones that involve manipulation, gaslighting, or emotional neglect, can lead to symptoms that look a lot like trauma. Anxiety, fatigue, difficulty sleeping, self-doubt, even physical symptoms like headaches and tension. Your body keeps the score even when your mind tries to minimize it. And yet, when we think about ending those relationships or even setting hard boundaries, we feel guilty. Why? Because somewhere along the line, we internalize this message. If you were a better friend, daughter, partner, coworker, you'd be able to handle it. But let's reframe that. Maybe it's not that you're too sensitive. Maybe it's that the dynamic was too draining. The people who reach that breaking point often aren't the ones who didn't try. They're the ones who tried too hard for too long, the ones who kept showing up, giving benefit of the doubt, making excuses, staying hopeful, until they found themselves staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. wondering, why do I feel so empty? I've sat across from too many people who have come to that moment of clarity, and it's not usually a dramatic event that gets them there. It's a slow build, a quiet realization that they've been ignoring themselves, that the cost of staying is their peace, their energy, their sense of worth, and the guilt that shows up when they choose to walk away. That guilt isn't about having done something cruel. It's about finally saying, I matter too. And for some of us, that's a brand new sentence. That's where the discomfort lives, not in the act of leaving, but in finally honoring a truth. We've spent years. Your responsibility. Your responsibility is to your well-being, your integrity, and your truth. Cutting someone off, especially when you're emotionally burned out, isn't about revenge. It's about restoration. You're not creating distance to hurt them. You're creating distance because staying close is hurting you. So if you're sitting in the guilt that comes with that decision, I want you to remember this. Protecting your energy is not selfish. It's sacred. And no one else gets to decide how much of yourself you're required to give in order to be good. Only you can decide what's too much. And when it is, you're allowed to choose peace over performance. Every single time. You don't owe anyone unlimited access to you. This is one of the hardest truths to hold, especially for those of us who've been praised for being so easy to talk to, always there, or the strong one. Somewhere along the way, many of us were taught that being a good person means being endlessly available, that love means self-sacrifice, and that setting limits is cold or selfish. But here's what I've come to learn through both research and lived experience. You don't owe anyone unlimited access to you. Not your time, not your energy, not your emotional availability. We live in a culture that glorifies overextending ourselves. Saying yes when we're already stretched thin gets labeled as loyalty. Ignoring our gut instincts in favor of preserving the peace gets mistaken for kindness. And when we finally do reach a breaking point, when we say, I can't keep doing this, we're often met with pushback, guilt trips, or accusations that we've changed. But you know what? You have changed. Because growth often looks like finally recognizing your own needs and giving them the same weight you've always given everyone else's. It's deeply uncomfortable when we start putting up boundaries in relationships that have never had them. There's often a fear that people will leave, get angry, or turn on us. And sometimes they do, not because your boundary is wrong, but because it disrupted a dynamic that worked well for them. A dynamic where your self-abandonment kept everything running smoothly. And that's where the guilt creeps in. It whispers, you're letting them down. They need you. What if they fall apart without you? But here's what I've seen over and over again. When we confuse over responsibility with love, we start carrying burdens that were never ours to begin with. And eventually those burdens crush us. Not all at once, slowly, quietly, in the form of resentment, exhaustion, emotional disconnection, sometimes even physical symptoms like anxiety or illness. That's the cost of giving people more access to you than you can actually sustain. You're allowed to change the terms of your emotional availability. You're allowed to say this doesn't work for me anymore, even if you used to say yes. You're allowed to take space, go quiet, or even walk away entirely. Not as an act of cruelty, but as an act of clarity. And I want to be very clear about this. Clarity is kindness. It might not feel like it in the moment. It might sting. But being honest about your limits is far more respectful than continuing to show up halfway, presentful, drained, and disconnected. One of the most powerful things I've seen people do is reclaim their emotional real estate. To recognize that their time, energy, and attention are limited resources, and that not everyone is entitled to them. That's not harsh, that's healthy. Because when you treat your emotional availability like an open buffet, free, unlimited, always on, it doesn't just invite connection, it invites consumption. And eventually, there's nothing left for you. What I found is that the people who love you well, the ones who are emotionally safe, grounded, and invested in mutual respect, they won't be threatened by your boundaries. They might need to adjust, sure, but they'll stay. They'll meet you in the space you create, not guilt you for creating it. That's the difference between relationships built on obligation and relationships built on respect. So if you've limited your access to someone, if you've pulled back or even cut ties entirely, and now you're sitting in guilt, I want to ask you something. What are you actually feeling guilty for? For hurting them or for finally prioritizing yourself? Because those are not the same thing. And if your answer is the second one, then that's not guilt you need to carry. That's a sign that you're stepping into your worth. And worthiness doesn't require explanation or apology. Grief and guilt often travel together. But they're not the same thing. When we talk about cutting someone off, especially someone we once cared deeply about, it's easy to get tangled up in emotions. One of the most common things I hear is, I feel so guilty, but I know I had to do it. And what I've learned both through research and through real conversations with people who've been there is that a lot of what we label as guilt is actually grief. And those two emotions, while they feel similar in the body, tight chest, heavy stomach, racing mind, they are not the same. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Grief says, I lost something important. And those are two very different truths. Grief is part of the human experience. It's what shows up when something meaningful ends. Even if that thing was dysfunctional, even if it was hurting you, you can grieve the loss of a person and still know that the relationship wasn't healthy. You can miss what was good, the laughter, the history, the connection, while also accepting that the pain outweighed the joy. But most of us weren't taught to separate guilt from grief. We're taught to interpret pain as a sign we've done something wrong. So when we feel the ache of loss after cutting someone off, we assume it means we should go back, that we made a mistake, that we're selfish or cold-hearted. But feeling grief doesn't mean the decision was wrong. It just means it mattered. And that's such an important distinction. You can love someone and still choose yourself. You can miss someone and still know they're not meant to be in your life. You can carry memories with you and still walk away with your head held high. It's not black and white. Human relationships rarely are. They live in the gray. And in that gray space, there's often a lot of discomfort. But discomfort isn't danger. It's just an emotional signal that something significant has shifted, that your heart needs space to adjust to a new reality. And look, grief doesn't follow a linear path. Some days you'll feel strong and grounded. Other days, a song or a smell or a random memory will send you spiraling. That's normal. It doesn't mean you've backtracked. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. We don't give ourselves nearly enough permission to grieve people who are still alive, especially when it wasn't death, but choice that ended the connection. There's a unique kind of pain in choosing to let go of someone who could still call or text or walk back into your life at any moment, but knowing that allowing them back would cost you more than you're willing to give. That's a sacred grief, one that deserves compassion, not shame. So what do we do with the guilt that's actually grief in disguise? We honor it. We name it. We sit with it and say, I'm allowed to feel this. I'm allowed to mourn the end of something, even if I was the one who ended it. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. That's emotional maturity. And yes, there may still be moments where you wonder if you could have done more, if you gave up too soon, if they've changed, if it would be easier just to go back. But here's what I want you to remember in those moments. You made the decision for a reason that was valid and real. And even if it hurts now, that doesn't make it wrong. It just makes it hard. And hard is something you can handle. So when grief shows up wearing guilt's clothes, don't rush to fix it. Don't silence it. Let it speak. Let it remind you of what you've survived, what you've chosen, and who you're becoming in the process. That version of you, the one who listens to their own needs, honors their worth, and makes hard choices in the name of healing, is someone worth trusting. And trust, more than anything, is how we come home to ourselves. Let's be honest. Cutting someone off, even when it's necessary, rarely feels clean. It's messy. It stirs up guilt, grief, self-doubt, and second-guessing. But What I hope you've heard today is that protecting your peace is not a betrayal. It's not a failure of compassion. It's a bold, brave act of self-respect. You are not here to be endlessly available. You are not here to keep proving your worth through your ability to tolerate pain. You are allowed to choose your well-being. You are allowed to outgrow relationships that can't meet you where you are. And you are absolutely allowed to set the standard for how you will be treated moving forward. This isn't about being hard or closed off. It's about being rooted, grounded, clear. And yes, that clarity might make some people uncomfortable, but don't mistake their discomfort for your wrongdoing. That's just the cost of growth sometimes. Not everyone is meant to go where you're headed. So if you're feeling guilt today, take a breath and ask yourself, did I act out of love, out of truth, out of self-respect? If the answer is yes, then let that be enough. Let that carry you forward. You don't have to explain your healing. You don't need permission to protect your peace. You're allowed to leave the table when respect is no longer being served. Good luck as you step into your power. Good luck as you reclaim your voice. And above all, good luck honoring the beautiful, complex, and worthy human you are. You've got this.